Shelley Fabares' funeral has become the focus of a deeply emotional farewell, with her husband Mike Farrell facing the painful task of remembering the woman he loved, while fans look back on a career that made her a familiar face to generations of television viewers. For decades, Shelley was known for the warmth, grace, and quiet strength she brought to the screen, but behind the famous smile was a private life filled with relationships, challenges, resilience, and moments that were rarely visible to the public. Now, as attention turns toward a funeral update and the tribute connected to Mike Farrell, the most powerful part of her story is not simply how audiences remember her, but how the people closest to her describe the woman she was when the cameras were gone. Shelley Fabares became famous at a remarkably young age, growing from a child performer into one of television's most recognizable actresses. Her early success introduced her to millions of viewers, but it was her role as Mary Stone on the Donna Reed Show that transformed her into a household name. Week after week, audiences watched her play a character who seemed to represent an entire generation of young Americans, and her popularity continued to grow beyond television. She also stepped into music, recording songs during the height of her fame and achieving a major chart success with Johnny Angel, a song that became closely associated with her early career. But Shelley's life was never simply a story of fame and easy success. As the years passed, she faced professional changes, personal challenges, and eventually serious health difficulties that altered the course of her life. Yet the quality that seemed to remain constant was her ability to keep moving forward. That resilience became especially important later in life, when her health required major decisions and support from the people closest to her. Mike Farrell was one of those people. Their relationship eventually became one of the most important chapters of Shelley's private life, and their marriage represented a partnership that extended far beyond Hollywood appearances. Farrell was already a respected actor and activist, best known to television audiences for his role as Captain B.J. Honeycutt on Mass *H, when his life became intertwined with Shelley's. Their relationship developed into a marriage built around companionship, mutual support, and a shared understanding of the unusual pressures that come with public life. For Shelley, that kind of support mattered because her later years were shaped by health concerns that were far more serious than the glamorous image many fans still associated with her. She underwent a liver transplant in the early 2000s after being diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis, a condition that had severely affected her health. The transplant became a turning point in her life, and Farrell was there during a period that required enormous patience and strength. Shelley later spoke about the experience with gratitude, acknowledging how fortunate she was to have received the transplant and how much the support around her meant. Her health journey also changed the way many people viewed her. Instead of simply remembering the actress from classic television, fans began to see the determination of a woman who had endured circumstances that could have easily overwhelmed her. She continued living her life, maintaining relationships and staying connected to the people and causes that mattered to her. That is why a farewell involving Mike Farrell carries such emotional significance. When someone has shared years of ordinary life with another person, grief is not measured only by public appearances or famous memories. It exists in the quiet moments, the routines, the private jokes, the conversations, and the memories that nobody else can fully understand. Farrell knew Shelley not only as an actress admired by millions, but as his wife and closest companion. He knew the woman behind the performances, behind the photographs, and behind the public image, and that makes any tribute from him especially meaningful. Fans may remember Shelley as the bright young actress who became famous on the Donna Reed Show, but Farrell knew the woman who continued growing and changing long after those early television years. He knew the person who experienced the difficult realities of aging, illness, and the changing entertainment industry. He also witnessed her determination to remain engaged with life even when circumstances became difficult. The contrast between Shelley's youthful public image and the reality of her later years is one of the reasons her story remains so compelling. For many people, celebrities become frozen in time. A photograph from the 1960s can make someone appear forever young, even though the person continued living an entire life after that image was captured. Shelley experienced exactly that phenomenon. To one generation, she remained the beautiful young face from the Donna Reed Show. To another, she was remembered for her later television appearances and film roles. To Farrell, she was something completely different. She was the woman who shared his life. That distinction becomes impossible to ignore when discussing a funeral or final farewell. A public memorial may bring together professional colleagues, longtime friends, relatives, and fans, but grief remains intensely personal. Every person arrives carrying a different memory. One former co-star may remember a scene they filmed together decades ago. A friend may remember a private conversation. A fan may remember hearing Johnny Angel for the first time. And Mike Farrell would naturally carry memories that go far beyond anything that could ever be captured in a television retrospective. Shelley's career itself deserves to be remembered in full. She was not simply a supporting performer from an earlier era. She became one of the defining young television stars of her generation, and her success continued through different stages of her life. Her transition from child actress to adult performer demonstrated a longevity that many young stars never achieve. She worked in television, movies, and music, and she remained recognizable long after her first major role. She appeared in films such as Brian's Song and played important television roles that allowed audiences to see a more mature side of her talent. She also returned to television repeatedly, proving that her appeal had never depended entirely on the youthful image that first made her famous. But perhaps one of the most interesting parts of Shelley's story is what happened away from the spotlight. As her career evolved, she became increasingly protective of her private life. She did not appear to seek the kind of constant attention that surrounds many modern celebrities. Instead, she built a quieter existence, surrounded by the people she trusted. Her marriage to Farrell became a central part of that life. Their relationship was not defined by constant public spectacle, and that privacy makes the emotional significance of their farewell even stronger. When a private person becomes the subject of public mourning, fans often realize how little they truly knew about the final chapters of that person's life. They know the roles, the songs, the interviews, and the photographs, but they do not know the ordinary moments. They do not know the conversations that happened after the cameras stopped. They do not know the small acts of kindness or the difficult days that never became headlines. Those are the memories that belong to the family. And in Shelley's case, Mike Farrell was one of the people who knew those memories best. That is why his tribute has attracted so much attention. People are not simply interested in what he might say about an actress. They are interested in what he reveals about the person behind the actress. A powerful farewell does not need dramatic language to leave an impact. Sometimes the most emotional tribute comes from recognizing the simple truth that a person mattered deeply to someone else. Shelley mattered to Farrell. She mattered to her family. She mattered to the people who worked beside her. And she mattered to generations of viewers who grew up watching her on television. As fans revisit her career, they may discover just how much of her life was shaped by perseverance. She entered show business young, experienced enormous popularity, adapted as the industry changed, confronted serious health challenges, and continued forward. Her journey was not perfect, and it was never completely free of difficulty, but that is exactly what makes it human. Shelley Fabares did not simply live the life of a television star. She lived through the realities that eventually come for everyone, including illness, uncertainty, changing relationships, and the passage of time. What made her story special was the grace with which she faced those changes. The final farewell therefore becomes about more than saying goodbye. It becomes an opportunity to remember the complete person. The young Shelley who captured America's attention, the singer who briefly conquered the music charts, the actress who continued working across multiple decades, the woman who faced a serious medical crisis and came through it, the wife who built a long relationship with Mike Farrell, and the person whose presence touched people in ways that may never have been fully visible. For Farrell, the loss is undoubtedly more personal than anything a fan could understand. Public audiences can turn off the television and step away from the memories, but family members cannot simply return to normal life after losing someone who has been part of their world for years. A familiar chair may suddenly feel different. A photograph can become difficult to look at. A simple routine can bring back a memory without warning. Those are the parts of grief that never appear in celebrity headlines. They are also the parts that make a farewell real. Shelley's legacy will continue through the work she left behind. Every rerun of the Donna Reed Show introduces another generation to the young actress who became Mary Stone. Every performance from her later career reminds audiences that she continued evolving long after her earliest success. Every discussion of her life brings attention back to a woman who survived challenges that could have changed her completely. And every memory shared by Mike Farrell adds another layer to the story, reminding people that behind the famous name was a real person who loved, struggled, laughed, worked, and built a life away from the spotlight. The most meaningful way to remember Shelley Fabares is therefore not to reduce her to one role, one illness, one photograph, or one final chapter. Her life was much larger than that. She gave audiences decades of performances and memories, but she also gave the people closest to her something far more valuable, a lifetime of shared experiences that cannot be recreated. As the attention surrounding her funeral and Mike Farrell's tribute continues, the sadness is naturally overwhelming, but there is also something comforting in the fact that Shelley's work remains. Her voice, her performances, her familiar smile, and the characters she brought to life can still be experienced by audiences who were not even born when she first became famous. That is one of the strange gifts of entertainment. The performer may eventually leave the stage, but the work remains waiting for someone new to discover it. Shelley Fabares spent much of her life in front of an audience, but her most important legacy may ultimately be found outside the spotlight, in the relationships she built and the people who knew her best. Mike Farrell's farewell represents that private side of her story. It reminds us that the woman fans remember from television was also someone's wife, someone's friend, someone's family, and someone whose absence leaves a space that cannot simply be filled by another performance. Her career may have introduced her to millions, but the people closest to her knew the person beyond the fame. And perhaps that is the most fitting way to say goodbye to Shelley Fabares, not by focusing only on the sadness of her final chapter, but by remembering the remarkable journey that came before it, the talent that made her unforgettable, the strength that carried her through difficult years, and the love that remained at the center of her private life. Shelley Fabares may have spent her youth under Hollywood lights, but the memories she leaves behind belong to everyone who watched her, everyone who worked beside her, and most of all to those who loved her when the cameras were nowhere in sight.